So I picked this wonderful leaf out of my backyard, and I thought this is a delightful encounter with nature. I would like to look at this object from many different angles, and just to take a look at it from above and below, and just to see what we have here. Just since it has a little stem, I'm just kind of moving it around a little bit. Behind me is my drawing paper. I'm going to start to draw my leaf as well. And I'm going to use a marker for clarity purposes so that you can see on the paper. And so as we work with this, this form, I'm essentially thinking in terms of the leaf as a large shape, kind of breaking it down, looking at the stem in the middle, and thinking about where it's curving and where it's going. So perhaps I can start off with that, thinking about a straight line. I'm also going to look at the fact that there is a few other lines here that are like little stems. In the middle, we can take a look at that. So my lighting will allow you to see through the leaf, but we want to look for these points. Just like a spine is on a human being, a leaf has its own shapes as well. So as a visual artist, I'm using this for very, very basic terms, but my goal is to be able to get the shape down on the paper. So we're going to take this shape, and I'm going to go ahead and make a line like that, and also one like this. Kind of like a road map, because it's going to allow us to see how this leaf can take shape with the drawing. So I have it over here in this corner, the middle part, and then the two other lines we see here. To break this down. Now, some of you might have a real love for drawing, and you have your own way of going about it, but I wanted to show you how this can actually be developed and go into a form of sequencing. So essentially, as I'm drawing this out, I want to also look on the bottom part, this curve, and also another little curve here. So essentially what I've just done is I've drawn on the bottom. My marker will try to get these guys. So as we look on the screen, I'm looking at the bottom part now, trying to get the integrity of this leaf. It doesn't have to be perfect, perfectly, rendition of this, but we're trying to get a sense of how we can express ourselves in a way that is, it develops a sense of our observation, but also helping us to understand the shapes a little bit better. So there are these triangle shapes too. The middle part has kind of like a little point here, point here. This is allowing me to kind of go with a certain flow with this leaf. And I'm essentially just going along the perimeter. I realize it's very easy for me to do something like that since I've been drawing for many years, but it's my invitation for you to see if we can give a try this. We have. So what did I do here? Just kind of worked along with these shapes. So I'm tracing around, thinking in terms of these little points here. Drawing has a certain kind of flow to it. So if you were thinking in terms of that, just to give you a little bit more of a heads up on that practice part, I'm using my marker. I'm also thinking in terms of a line. It can also taper off to be very thin. If you're using a pencil or a marker on your drawing, think in terms of lines being very thin and also being very thick at times too. So as I'm practicing this, you may want to practice this on another sheet of paper to try to get a feel for this. Point could look like a little bird shape here. We have the points moving right along. So yeah, it's a different kind of approach than some other things, but I wanted to try to slowly kind of go into the process of the drawing of the leaf. So we're right up in this area right here as I show you closer. And I want to go back over in this general area to see if I can kind of draw this right out. I love drawing so much, and it gives me a certain sensibility for how I can encounter the world around me. And so, in a sense, this is an opportunity for you to have a real encounter with nature. I'm drawing in a certain way, but at home, at your place, you're going to be drawing this a little differently than I am. But you're going to be looking at some of the ways in which I'm breaking it down. But I really want to emphasize your own particular expression too. How do you feel about the shape? And how this is going to change and take shape as we morph and sequence this. So it's really can be really cool. So I'm just going into this next level. Then we're going to take this over to another place, working over here. And I've got some very interesting little shapes. And they're like these little tiny points, like a little fiery flame type shapes, so to speak. And then, in a sense, I have my leaf shape. There's a lot of these little points. And when I'm thinking about this, they're not hard points that hurt me, but they're also very interesting to draw on. So I'm thinking in terms of what else. I'm looking at the side of the leaf. So the leaf has these compartments. You have this compartment here, one. You have the middle part, and then the third part here. 1, 2, and 3. And we're trying to break that down. But also, I'm not quite finished. I want to take a look at the leaf. Maybe I'll look at it like this. What does it look like? This is a foreshortening in art terms when something is coming right at you. Just to have an encounter with it a little bit. They're saying, man, maybe I can try to draw it like this, or maybe like this. Lots of different ways we can approach it. And I love the fact that we have this, and it also is very much the form that I'm holding it. And not everyone has a stem like this, but if you have a leaf you can take hold of. I'm going to try to draw it a little differently. So I'm just going to take it now to this point. I'm looking at that as it comes down, and then this little stem. Come down like that. Just breaking it down here. Way up in the middle, I can see how that middle part, that stem, goes way up. So I just want to get a feel for this, make it a little tip. It's, and then it kind of angles a little funny over here, not quite the same as before. And I realize, that's really easy for me. But as long as you can kind of see like a little area like where the stem would be, and it guides all the way back here. So there's that central point, right in there. Think of that as a circle, like at the end of the stem, and that's going to extend out. I've made a circle on my drawing. You can kind of see that there. Is that okay? I hope I'm not going too fast for everybody, but I think it's possible that, as we look at this leaf, we're breaking it down in compartments, like I said before, 1, 2, 3. And it's pretty interesting as we see this process. This leaf is going to take on totally more of a instinctual kind of creative drawing that we can make it into what we like. So I'm actually up in this area. Have these little veins kind of like coming in a little bit too here. I hope this is helpful for you guys, and so you can see how this is going with the leaf. Now I'm going to work right in this third part. We have 5 different areas, but it's really 3 major parts. If you think about the leaf, another point there. essentially, it gives me a better idea. So the leaf, we have two different leaves drawn here, one from the side and one more directly. So it gives us a little bit of an idea how this leaf um, is put forth. So what I'd like to do at this time is, as we have the leaf, we can also take a look at how we can change it around a little bit, how we can create this morph, this morphing. So I can go over with my pencil, and I can shade it in a little bit. I can work with the pencil. Putting a little value on it, drawing in, thinking in terms of how I can work with the pencil. I'm not going to go over my circle, I'm just going to kind of leave the circle blank. It's going to give me a little bit of an idea of how this can go. Now, working with pencil, you know, it gives us a chance, and then you're working with pencil. Now, I use like a heavier marker so you can see it better on the screen, but we can really build up and develop a sense of value with our pencil to make it darker in spots. Now I'm kind of, you know, I put down the model of the leaf, but I want to see, like, what can we really do with this form? How can we make it more personal and unique for ourselves? It doesn't remain just this leaf form, that we can start to change it around. So I'll have another piece of paper in a minute. I'll put it up. But I just wanted to show you what we can do with the pencil and the value. So take your pencil and kind of work along the edges if you can, to the point where you can really start to see like the value change, especially when you get up towards the tip. Here we are in this one area here. You can take the pencil and kind of bring it up in here a little bit. And I'm just going over top. I'm using a pencil that's very soft lead. It's a 6B art pencil. You can see how that goes too. Different types of drawing tools at your home. It's okay. So the nice thing about offering this workshop, you can always go back and rewind, or rewind it to the earlier stage of this drawing and see how I started off with. Remember the 1, 2, 3. We're getting a flow for the leaf, and then we use this also in this, so that would be like 1, 2, and 3. Even though we have these two other quadrants at the bottom, make the 5 positions, but just at the major thrust of the leaf. But I love so much of the fact that we can take it in stages and just see how we're doing with our process. We'll be working with this next piece of paper to kind of play with this morphing sequencing now. Step 2 will allow us to take this leaf into a different direction, which allows us to really have fun with this stuff on a new level. Let's take it to another level. I'm just going to put up a new paper here. Let's see how we can do with this. So we have the leaf form here, so we're going to go for it. Okay. So let's remember what we did just a second ago. We were working with, like, just to break it down, let's remember 1, and then we had 2 and 3. When we use 3 lines, essentially, we have a real rudimentary or basic flow form that kind of relates to this leaf. It doesn't have all the spires and the flames and stuff on the edge, but let's just say it's an armature. An armature is a word that relates to the beginning. So an armature, we could spell it A-R-M-A-T-U-R-E. It helps us in art terms. It's like the spine or the basic. We also use the word spine, which relates to our backs, but it also relates to a core would be, this would be the spine. So if we want to have fun with this, we can really play with it, and we can change a lot. So my invitation for you now at this point, like 15 minutes into our workshop, you can start to think in terms of, what could we do with this to change this up even more? We have the leaf, and also with my lighting, I'm also having a shadow play, which allows me to see the basic shape of the leaf. But also, what can I do with this? So I'm going to break it down a little bit. I'm going to bring a little bit of this, take a little bit of the actual beginning part of the drawing, and I'm just taking a little bit from the leaf. Not a whole lot, but just enough to get me started. I want to have fun with this. I want to change it up. I want to make it something more personal for me. So I'm going to have fun with some of these shapes. I'm going to go like this. Then I have my circle here. I have my little spine. Now I'm going to do a little something there, which kind of brings it out. You see what I did there? I just took this little shape, went like that, went like this, and I went like that. Put my straight line down like that, went down like this, over, like a little three-dimensional rectangle. I can make it rounded if I want to as well, but that's like my end of my little leaf. But I want this to change a little bit. So the middle part, I can put a dot here. I know it's going to be a bigger leaf. I can also think in terms of when I'm drawing, just putting a little dot helps me to understand where do I want to place things. Let's say I'm going to make it up here. That's fine. I'm just going to play with that. This leaf shape. And I'm going to also go a little bit like that. And here, I'm just having fun with these loops. And then we go back here. The leaf is starting to take on a totally different shape, but I enjoy the fact that it is different. And then maybe I can really go back in. So I'm going to go back in with some lines. Here I go with some lines. Using lines, it changes the whole dimension, but also in keeping with if you're working with your pencil, you can really make them very thick. Think in terms of how this leaf is going to take shape, and what does it mean to you? How does it feel? You think, well, maybe I want to really pull lines and just really get it in there. And I'm going to have a lot of fun with those lines. You can have different ways of drawing. You might want to do something completely out of the ordinary, like just do like a little squiggle right in the middle of it. I'm going to do a squiggle right in the middle of my leaf, and another squiggle right in there. It completely changes it up. It's no longer the same drawing we had from before. Now, in the earlier time, just a few minutes ago, we worked with our basic construct, looking for observation, which is important because when we're drawing, it's nice to be able to see something as it is from its environment. But that's also takes time, and it's also nice to be able to spring into a new drawing relationship, which is using our creative intellect and our imagination, and it's totally fine to see where we can go with that. So I'm also thinking in terms of this leaf. What else can I do with that? Well, I've done some squiggle lines. I'm also going to go back over. I'm thinking in terms of the thickness of the line and what's happening here. Very important that I think in terms of thick and thin lines, because when I do that, we're thinking in terms of graphic design, but also the fact that this is called an economy of line. Economy of line is another vocab word, but it really helps us to understand the economy of line or dynamics of line. And simply all that is, folks, is just working with a thick, thick line to something which tapers into a very, very, very almost indecipherable thin line. But the dynamics, as you can see, thick to thin, it changes, the integrity of the leaf, and it's a very interesting way of playing with the actual shape. And you can even get into some very thick, heavy lines. You can have a lot of fun with what that goes and how that goes, and creates some kind of quality. And we can also do that down here. I'm using a marker, which is different than a pencil. By doing that. So what's happening now is I'm taking a little bit of these kind of points and I'm playing with it, but I'm using my own artistic imagination to kind of change it up a little bit. I'm no longer keeping from observation as much as I'm using my creative insights and my instinct to play with it a little bit. So I invite you to take a few minutes at home, even if you want to take another sheet of paper and to practice this a little bit. You might want to try this in different ways, maybe a couple sheets of 8.5 by 11 paper, and just take the basic shape of the leaf. Some of you might want to trace it. If you have to trace it, that's okay. But I also want you to think in terms of what's the next step? How does this change? It's another generation, another form, and what it will be as you develop it. So as you work on that, I'm also going to develop mine here at the workshop studio, and I'm going to play with some other shapes because I really love happening with these squiggles. I just completely doodled into the leaf a little bit, and I'm going to add these little shapes into mine. Sometimes it just feels right. I can't always explain exactly why did I do that. I did it because I felt like since I'm showing you through a workshop, I just want you to see that there's so much we can do with our lines. Everything has been kind of based on a curve. Nature essentially is based on not a whole lot of straight lines, but things that are just slightly bent. Like look at this curve. There's a purpose for that in the way this leaf was hanging from the tree like this. But also to hold it like this, essentially we see the curve. Look at that curve up there. Look how beautiful that is. Nature is full of these great things. So all we have to have, in just the tiniest little aspect, we have a connection. We have a connection with the world around us. And as an artist, we have an opportunity to bring that into our domestic situation, our studios, sit down at our desk, and we can take that into a totally different level. So I'm using this marker again, and I know it's bold, and it's obviously a little different maybe than what you have at home, but we can give this a try. I'm looking for using my marker to develop a rhythm, all these beautiful lines. Like in the old days, your grandparents may have had a phone that had this cord along the line, this spiral cord. But I'm putting it inside the context of my leaf. I want my leaf to be an expression of me, and as well as something that will allow me to have some enjoyment in exploring what's really going on inside this leaf. I'm also going to do some other things like marks. Since I'm using my marker, by using lines and going around the perimeter of the leaf, I can express a different kind of form by simply putting this texture. It changes everything in my drawing. Little hash marks. I like that a lot. Just a little something so subtle around the edges there. It affects something. It's almost like a texture. It is a texture. It's visual, two-dimensional, but it also gives us something else. Just a little line. What is that? If you try that with your drawing, what do you think about that? How does that work for you? You might like it. You may not like it. So it's a question of trying different things. That's what I have these workshops for. You get a chance to explore and try things. So let's go back. Simply it's just we're using the leaf as our format. And we started with observation. We had the 3 areas, 1, 2, 3, and then we went up, did some pencil work to kind of start to think about how we can work with shading. And also now that we're exploring a shape that's completely new. It's much more instinctual. I'm going back into the leaf, but I'm taking on creative invitation to kind of add to it in a way that's totally different. That's morphing. Morphing. So I'll go back over here. Overlapping lines, intersecting lines. You saw it in the beginning, I just put these lines in, and now we're keeping things together in a whole new way. I'm just going to connect these lines. I'm making new lines. We'll do another drawing with the leaf too, but I just want you to have just an idea that how can I work with that? So each little area can have its little lines. I can put lines like this, lines like this. Essentially, as you're drawing at home, your drawing is going to be a little different than mine. I'm giving you an idea of what you can do, but essentially, I want to emphasize again, folks, that I want it to be your own creative exploration. The drawings and the shapes will come out of your own creative intellect. It's no longer just something that's from observation, but as I'm repeating, it's also coming out of your own instinct to say, what else can I do with this? How can I, catch this on in a whole new way from my own creative insights, my thoughts as a visual creative problem solver. I mean, heck, I could take this, cut it out, and I could Scotch tape it on my wall, and I could look at it for a couple of days. If I'm a visual artist and I'm painting a series of leaves, I could look at it and say, now, what do I feel about that? How's that working? Is it clear? Is it convincing to me that it is a leaf that responds? All these things are really important, or can be important, but, just kind of play on that. So just maybe I can work back. Like in the other drawing, we had some things here. I'm going to take this side and just kind of quickly finish this up so we can jump to the next one instead. Okay, folks? Thanks for your patience and sharing with me today. This workshop, again, is something that allows me to explore some of the things that I love to do in my own personal work, but it's also sharing in a way which allows us to work with sequencing and stages and how this can really come out to be a unique expression. So one would say that perhaps this is also abstract. You say, oh, you're making abstract work, as well as taking the perimeter of the leaf, like observation-based. Now we're morphing into something that you could say, okay, we've made an abstraction out of the leaf. But a lot of folks, when they're drawing, they say, well, I want to really draw something that I feel, and I don't want to go like exactly keeping to the shape. Is that okay? Sure it is. Absolutely okay. You have your own way of doing things. So as young kids, teens, all of you have an opportunity to explore. So let me do a couple of little things over here. Since we have this large leaf, I'm just going to start to play with some shapes. So when you're at home, take a fresh sheet of paper and give this a try with me. Let's say we take a circle. Let's bring the circle into the equation. A circle, we make a lollipop, okay? Shaped like a candy on a stick. Then you take that and you go from that point and make a point here, make a point there. Already we have our armature, remember that word, armature. And then we have this structure, which kind of like could be the leaf. I mean, leaves are a lot of different shapes. Round, curvy, pointy, fired like it flames. This is definitely like a flamey point. Let's say I take my armature, I'll go all the way up. Go all the way around, so I make it like a beach nut kind of shape. That's another type of leaf, totally different. But since we have the round shape and we're building this, we have our points here from the pencil work, then we can have, let's say do something like that, and do something like this, do something like this. Now we have a different kind of form coming out of this. We're changing the dimension of this shape by simply using lines. And we're making something which is symmetrical. Whatever we have on the right side, we have on the left side. But we're drawing, we're working with round versus these kind of triangles and points here. You see that? And I also like the idea that, well, maybe I want to do something a little different. Well, go up like this. And go up like this. And I'm going to take this all the way down like that. Changing that up. You know, maybe I want to do something and make this a little bit bigger. So I'll go like that. It changes this up, and all of a sudden this is really changing. It's not maybe not even a leaf anymore. But we can do different things. So I'm going to take my marker. I'm going to put some shading on this side. Here. It changes it up a little bit. So I'm going to try that again. I'm going to take a round circle, put a stick like a lollipop, point here, little line there. Let's just say I'm going to go up a little bit higher. Change it again, up. So this is similar to this one now. And the circle kind of disappears. Ways of working with your line. And maybe we go out here and do something like that. So it looks a little bit like that too coming out. So the leaf, you know, it really kind of evolves in different ways. So we're going to head into the pine cone now. But you can kind of see that we can take the leaf, and I give you permission to have fun with the shape, make it into something different. And we're going to take a look at how that can be. And we'll look back on these drawings a little bit later. But let's take another look at something else, which is called the pine cone. The pine cone is going to be right with us right now. Look at this. We can take a pine cone, which is a little bit more advanced. We can take a look at it from many different angles. I like the pine cone because it reminds me of just an animal like an armadillo. It also has this so protected, it's so strong, and it's also got little, you know, tiny little spine to it and little points that can make it very hard to hold it if you really squeeze it tight. But it's also something we can look at like a mini tree as well, and how we can encounter this as a visual thinker. I'm just going to spin it around a little bit. And I want you to pick up your pine cone that you have at your side and just slowly look at it. Take a minute. Try to see, look through and see where it begins. Look at the core, look on the bottom, see how it was made, how the thing grew on a tree. You look at the bottom, you see how it's all spiraled around. It has these wonderful plates. And you look at them. Look at it also as a creative thinker, and you just say, oh, well, you know, maybe there's a certain kind of wonder in that. You're like, wow. It was also similar to a flower. The way everything is kind of based on a circle. Everything's round. And it also has a core, another spine. You see where that spine is on the pine cone? Right in the middle? You can just imagine. It goes right up through the center. Right up through the center there. So we're going to enter into drawing now with the pine cone. Just take a minute to take a look at your pine cone and examine it and just say, man, is there something about this that makes, you know, say, I like this corner or that? for this section, we're going to put up a brand new page and a writing. The pine cone has a wonderful quality too. Pine cones. We got this. So the pine cone will be our next stop. Pine. So our workshop really relates to morphing and sequencing. So we're thinking in terms of this pine cone shape. Let's take a peek at it, see where we are with it. Essentially, I look at the shape very much in keeping with an oval. It wants to do something like that, and also you can just make imaginary lines, but you're going to deal with that spine again. You know that it's growing out of that center point, and so this little part is very important to think about. But we're also thinking in terms of all these little shapes that are coming in, and I just like to play with this from out of here. All these shapes. So what am I doing is I'm breaking down these shapes, and they look like little tiny forms like this. Almost look like whale flukes. If you were looking at a whale coming out of the water, it has these wonderful shapes. And look, nature's all related. All of these little shapes that come down like that, kind of go curve down. So if I were looking at a whale and a photograph of a whale's fluke, which is this part of the whale, it would be coming down something like that. I love these kinds of shapes. It's so fun to draw. So the pine cone, if you look closely at it, does have shapes like that too. And it's kind of neat to see that nature repeats itself in so many different incredible forms throughout life and through all kinds of marine life and everywhere. So when we think about, things, think about like, oh, this looks like something I've seen before, or maybe you've never seen it. So I want you to be open to using your association for like, where does this come from? And it helps you to develop the language, for drawing and also for associating this with other things in your life memory. So the pine cone, I'm breaking it down in these little slices, and they have a certain kind of system where they operate and meet in little platforms. Well, since it is a bit complicated, I wanted you to see a little bit about how these can go. We have some of them down here. They're kind of leading into the spine. So the pine cone is starting to take shape like that, and so I also know that I want to also work a little bit with the shadow part. you're taking a look at these shapes, and kind of bringing them down a little bit. Forms here, like this. Again, these shapes kind of go a little bit like this and a little bit like that. And we're repeating them in different ways. So we could break this down, even if we wanted to morph them, we could just take one of these shapes, we could have fun with it. As you can see, I'm breaking it down in different details, but as I turn the pine cone around, I think of this like a piece of architecture or a building. Everything has its place. Everything has a certain kind of proportion. And when it's been made, it also comes out at a certain ratio to the core. So everything has its almost absolutely perfectly shaped compared to each other. So I look at it like this, and I think about it like so much fun to draw. But it isn't easy because it is complex and it's all these little points in a certain kind of ratio all the way around it. So let's take a look at this. So at home, as you're looking at your paper, I want you to kind of think about the center point and the side. And I'm going to actually work on this a little bit here. I'll use my marker to kind of fill it in a little bit more. It helps to see it a little bit. So I'm putting the marker in the middle. You kind of see a little bit about how the pine cone starts to take shape, but it's still kind of abstract in a way. So I'm going to turn the pine cone around a little bit. You can see it from the top part. And the pine cone, kind of a large circle. Kind of getting to the point where it has a point in the middle. And these wonderful shapes that are coming out of it. And then like that. Like it's exploding out. So I'm angling out these shapes. Go back in. And then out like that. So what I want to show you by this is that it's like coming out, like our hand is coming out like this. It's taking a totally different shape. Almost like fingers like heading into your visual space. So we can take a look at this as the front part of the pine cone. You can see how this pine cone kind of comes to life a little bit. And then inside, there's all these, shading areas. It's coming out. So I'm taking a look at the side view and then the top view. And then we're going to be bringing all of these in different ways, shapes. And then we have another point here, 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 and here. Then we keep building on that. The pine cone is based on these ribs and all these So it's kind of like this, as this form starts to take shape, it kind of goes around, and every once in a while it kind of changes around a little bit here, 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 and here. Pine cone really sticking on. And I can go right in the middle of it here. You can almost see right in the middle. So it gives me a little bit of an idea about that too. So we have two different angles. We have the top view and then the side view. So when I look at the pine cone, your pine cone is going to be different than mine a little bit. And then we're going to take a look at across here. So I'm kind of making an artistic decision about the shapes and how they all come together here. Using my pencil, I kind of shade around these shapes that we saw right here. They really relate to the side of all these forms. Let's take a look at some of these shapes. I'm going to go back into them, and we're going to morph this out in a few minutes. But I just want to show you, as I'm looking here, let's break it down. So we have some shapes that are like this. And I'm going to go down like this, down like that. Using a circle, tapering it down. It's much more simple for us to see it like that. That's related to one of these. This whole shape could be broken down like this. So even though this is a bit on the abstract side, there's a relationship to all these ingredients that make up the beautiful pine cone. All these shapes and all these ways of helping to see it come to life. But I'm also trying to keep in touch with different kinds of shapes. Let's say I turn it on the side like this. And how do I see these shapes now? I'm going to look at these like this, and then it comes down a little bit like that. Again, they look like forms that you would see in a flower. These nature forms are really quite extraordinary. This kind of shape now. See that? How this coming along? So the whole idea of the relationship of this pine cone is that we get a chance to have fun with it now. We're going to morph a little bit and see. So think about the beginning of our leaf. Now we're into, been 50 minutes working together on this. We have the pine cone, and then we had the leaf. We explored with the leaf. So now we're going to go for a few minutes into the pine cone. And this is a bit on the abstract side too. But we're going to enter into this a little bit now. See how we can change this up. To give you permission to really allow the line to flow. Remember what he said a few minutes ago about the dynamics of line. We're really going to have fun with that, with this shape, because the observation drawings are a little bit more interpretive and more abstract than the leaf was. But I'm going to show you how we can enter into this next stage. So the sequencing. So the cool thing about it with the pine cone is that remember we had this shape. You could say it's like a round form. It ends like this. fire, it goes down. We also have the fact that if I really wanted to, I could just say, all right, well, I have these forms. Making little circles. And so these shapes that come in to play, kind of abstract them a little bit too. So if I remember, from observing, all of those shapes are essentially coming out of that whale fluke shape. Remember what we talked about a little earlier, the bone shape of whale fluke? Essentially, I'm stylizing it, but as a creative thinker, we can have a lot of fun with those shapes. Thinking in terms of, now, how do I want to build the compartment of this, pine cone? The pine cone has these stems that come out. It also relates to the inside, the outside. Heck, they could be little hearts. You can make these out of hearts. They could become little heart shapes, a lot like that. It's starting to take shape now. But I also want you to see how we can sequence and morph this into something a little different without going too far. Again, the reason why I get a chance to share with you is because I love drawing. And the most important thing for me as a creative thinker is to think of ways I can respond to nature, respond to what's around me, also how to share with the community and be in different therapeutic settings. There's a lot we can do with drawing. So since I'm using this marker, look at the way we can approach this. Let's just say I want to use dots. Dots are another way, they're little points, but it's not just dots, they're value. When you put them together and you put them all together, I'm putting a value, and this one side of the heart has got a value to it, which is very different than the other side. And if I space them out, if you look at it from a distance, which you are doing from your point of view from the laptop, you're going to see the value here. And so we can do that here as well. Inside here, a little bit here and there. So I'm also interested in interpretation. And obviously, as creative thinkers, you're looking at how can I draw something from nature, but also how can we allow it to grow and change using our creative intellect and our imagination to allow it. Give ourselves permission, so to speak, to take it to the next step, which is one of the cool things we can do as artists. And the other thing we can do, let's go back to that curly little. You can go in here a little bit. We go inside here, kind of darken it up a little bit. I'm going to make it darker here, darker here. Make it a little bit. So that's a form. Definitely much more interpretive, folks, but it's pine cone based, probably a little bit more than the one we did before. So I see that I can break things down with the shape, but then when I break it down also into a form that I can understand, sometimes it becomes more realistic, as I'm now discovering with this one, but also it shows you that you can break things down too. Like, how do we make sense of things that look very complex? And that's really great, because using our imagination, we can also break things down, and it also becomes quite realistic, which is a super cool thing to be able to do as a creative thinker and as a visual artist. So I'm going to try this again and just go for it and just play with it. Let's go back to our spine, our line that's coming in. a lot of the things, you know, in the pine cone kind of come out in shapes like that. Having fun with that. I'm also thinking in terms of like, okay, the pine cone is rounded. We want to go around here and go around here a little bit, maybe out here a little bit. A big broad shape. Looks like a leaf, but we're also going to remember the fact that its sculpture was rounded. It's not a leaf like this. But I've kind of broken it down a little bit here. I'm playing with these, I'm morphing these different forms. So I'm going to go back in with my marker and go in and see how we can play with this. Okay. Keeping with this too. Inside parts. I'm using the side of my marker to kind of do some fun things with it, but the pine cone is starting to take shape in a different kind of creative way, and then you can use a lot of different things. Here and here. So essentially what I'm doing, I'm just using these little shapes. Look, it looks like a little finger here. A hand with a little cutout. You see it here? See it here? I'm using my own artistic, artistic instinct to kind of play with this and see how this could come along here. But your drawing is going to take on its own dimension, its own shape too. But you're seeing a little bit about what I can do. And I'm really encouraging you to work with your drawing too and to see what you can make. So I really appreciate your attention today as we've worked over this last hour on sequencing and morphing as a way to enter into nature forms. So remember that when you're out in nature and you find shapes and forms, you can draw these from observation, but feel free to give yourself a wonderful invitation to have fun with them. Look for how they're made, look at the core basic shape, the spine, and then take it from there and see how you can explore with sequencing and morphing with your drawing. Thanks a lot. Hope to see you again.